My name is Isla Jennings, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, my apartment is quiet. Not the cozy, background TV kind of quiet, the kind that hums in your ears, like someone pulled the plug on your entire life and left you standing in the aftersound. 3 weeks ago, this place was a staging ground for a wedding. Fabric swatches on the coffee table, seating chart drafts taped to the wall. My laptop open to spreadsheets with payment deadlines highlighted in 3 different colors. A garment bag with my dress hanging in the corner, like a promise. Now it's just my apartment again. 4 walls, a couch that suddenly looks too big, and a ring-shaped indent in a jewelry box that holds nothing. People online keep calling me cold and savage for what I did. Maybe they're right, or maybe you'll understand when you hear it from the beginning. It started on a Thursday morning. I was halfway through a conference call with a client, nodding along while 3 different managers argued about deliverables. My camera was off, my microphone muted, my notebook open to a page that had slowly turned into a doodle of overlapping squares. Project management for a logistics firm sounds more glamorous than it is. Mostly, it's adults fighting over calendars. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me. I glanced at the screen, expecting a reminder about our venue walkthrough that afternoon. 3 weeks until the big day. Final details. Final payments. Final chance for anyone to back out before we signed our lives together in front of 120 people. The message preview showed one word that made my stomach tighten. Hey. I flicked my eyes back to the screen sharing on my laptop. Someone was droning about revised timelines. I opened the message. Hey, I know this is bad timing, but I can't stop thinking about Mara. I feel like I need to see her and get real closure before we get married. It wouldn't be fair to you to walk down the aisle with any doubts. I still love you, but I need to do this for myself. I'm going to see her this weekend. Don't worry. I read it once, then again. By the 3rd time, the words stopped feeling like words and more like someone had poured ice water straight into my chest. Mara, of course. Mara Lewis. The ex-girlfriend he'd dated for 5 years before me. The one he always described as intense and complicated, with a half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. The name that sometimes slipped into stories from back then, leaving a strange pressure in the room. I used to tell myself that was normal. We all have history. Apparently, some people like to take their history on weekend trips 3 weeks before their wedding. On my laptop, someone asked me a direct question. I had no idea what it was. My mouse hovered over the mute button. I clicked it and heard my voice come out smooth and automatic. Yeah, that timeline works for me as long as we get the revised specs by Monday, I said. Otherwise, we'll need to push it a week. They accepted that. More talking, more noise. On my desk, my phone glowed quietly with the message that had just detonated my future. People always imagine heartbreak as this shattering thing. Glass breaking, screaming, sobbing on the bathroom floor. Mine didn't shatter. It cooled. Like metal plunged into cold water. Every part of me that had been soft around Ethan Clark suddenly went rigid. He wasn't asking if it was okay to spend the weekend with his ex. He wasn't saying, "How do you feel about this? Can we talk?" It was a notification. I'm going to see her, don't worry. There's a kind of clarity that only shows up when the fog lifts at the worst possible moment. 1 second you're driving blind, trusting the road. The next, the whiteness disappears, and you realize you're 2 feet from the edge of a cliff. That text was my fog lifting. All at once, the last few months rearranged themselves in my head. The distance. The nights he stayed late at the office, but his timesheets didn't match. The late-night texting he brushed off as, "The guy's planning something for the bachelor party." The way he flinched, just slightly, when I joked about us deleting our ex's numbers once we were married. Little things I had filed under wedding stress, because that's what everyone tells you. It's normal to argue. Everyone freaks out a little before the big day. Sure, some people color code their planners. Some people go on soul-searching weekends with their exes. I muted my microphone again. Isla, are you still with us? Someone asked. I need to step away for a moment, I replied. I'll send my notes in an email. I ended the call without waiting for anyone to respond. The apartment was suddenly, brutally silent. No colleagues, no client voices, just the buzz of the refrigerator and the faint hum of traffic 6 floors below. I stared at Ethan's message, at the way he'd framed it like some noble act. It wouldn't be fair to you to walk down the aisle with any doubts. The unfair part, apparently, wasn't him still being emotionally entangled with Mara. It was the theoretical possibility that he might do that after he married me. I picked up my phone. My hands were very, very steady. I typed exactly 3 words. Take your time. I hit send. I turned my phone face down on the desk. Then I opened my laptop again, but not to rejoin the meeting. The wedding wasn't going to be postponed. It was going to be dismantled. My first call wasn't to my maid of honor, not to my parents, not to my friends. It was to David Clark, Ethan's father. He answered on the second ring, his voice formal but warm, the way it always was with me. David Clark speaking. Hi, David, it's Isla. There was a brief beat of surprised pleasantness. Isla, everything okay? Are we still meeting at the venue I'm sorry to bother you at work, I interrupted, keeping my voice calm, almost clinical. Something serious has come up regarding the wedding. The word serious did something to his tone. It sharpened. Is Ethan all right? He's fine, I said, physically at least. I could hear a faint rustle on the other end, like he'd stood up from his chair. What's happened? I looked at the blank space on my wall where the seating chart used to hang. I had taken it down that morning because one of the sticky notes kept falling off. It felt symbolic now. Ethan just informed me, I said, that he's going to spend this weekend with his ex-girlfriend Mara to get closure before the wedding. He says he still loves me, but he needs to do this for himself. Silence. Not the polite kind. The stunned, heavy kind. I could hear him breathing. In the background, faintly, Sarah's voice. David, what is it? He what? He finally said. He's going to see Mara, I repeated, 3 weeks before our wedding. He feels it wouldn't be fair to marry me with doubts. Under those circumstances, I cannot move forward. As of now, I'm calling off the engagement. Another silence. Then, almost under his breath, to Sarah, he's going to see Mara before the wedding. I imagined her face, shock tightening around her eyes, the way it did when she heard bad news. For a second, I felt guilty, not for what I was doing, but for the way they were finding out. There's no gentle way to tell someone their son just set fire to his own future. I don't know what to say, David managed. His voice had gone thin and flat. There's nothing you need to say, I replied. I just felt you and Sarah had a right to know immediately. I also have a couple of rings that belong to your family. I'd like to return them this evening, if that works. The engagement rings. When Ethan proposed, he loved the idea of us both wearing rings. A modern, equal thing, he'd said. 2 matching symbols. 2 matching commitments. His parents had helped pay for the simple platinum band he insisted I pick out for him. My ring, the one I'd spent 3 months of my salary on, had been his pride and joy to show everyone. Now both rings felt like props from a play that had been canceled mid-rehearsal. Yes, David said quietly. Yes, that's fine. I'll be home after 6. Thank you, I said. I'm sorry it turned out this way. So are we, Isla, he replied. I could hear Sarah crying softly in the background. So are we. The next calls were easier, in a way. The venue coordinator was sympathetic but firm. The final payment we'd made 2 weeks ago was non-refundable. $20,000. Gone with a, "We're so sorry, but it's in the contract." The caterer wasn't much better, nor the photographer, nor the band. Each call felt like hammering a nail into the coffin of a version of my life that no longer existed. By the time I got to the travel agent to cancel our honeymoon to Greece, I felt hollow. Another 5,000 lost. Another chirpy voice saying, I wish there were more I could do. I wish there had been more Ethan could do too, like not booking a spiritual field trip to his ex's arms. When the last booking was canceled, I went to the small stationery store across the street and bought cardboard boxes. The clerk asked if I was moving. I smiled and lied. In a way, I was. Back at the apartment, I walked through each room with the boxes flattened under my arm. Ethan's shoes lined up by the door, his weights in the corner, the shelf he'd slowly colonized in the bathroom with his shaving kit and cologne. His side of the wardrobe, overflowing because he hated folding anything. I started in the bedroom. T-shirts, jeans, dress shirts bought specifically for engagement photos, the cufflinks his father gave him. I folded everything neatly, more carefully than he ever had. It wasn't spiteful. It was methodical. If I was going to erase him from my space, I was going to do it properly. Ethan, clothes. I wrote it on the first box in black marker. Next came the bathroom. Razors, cologne. The hair product he swore was different from the 3 identical jars already on the shelf. The aftershave I'd given him last Christmas. Ethan, bathroom. Books he'd never finished. Video games he'd insisted he needed time to really get into. A drawer full of tangled cables that I knew he'd never organize if I left it to him. Ethan, books. Ethan, MISC. Ethan, tech. By the time I was done, there were 22 boxes stacked in the spare room. Neat, labeled, contained. The apartment already felt larger, like walls that had been inching closer without me noticing suddenly took a step back. At 6:30, I drove to the Clarks' house with 2 small ring boxes in my coat pocket. Sarah answered the door. Her eyes were red and swollen, the kind of puffiness that only comes from crying all afternoon. David stood behind her, jaw clenched, trying to look composed for all of us. "Isla," she said, voice trembling, "come in, please." "I won't stay long," I replied, staying on the doorstep. Going inside felt too much like pretending this was just a difficult conversation instead of an ending. I took the first ring box out of my pocket and handed it to David. "My ring," I said. "I believe this came partly from you and Sarah." He took it without looking inside. Then I handed him the second box. Inside was the simple platinum band Ethan had been so proud of, the symbol of his equal commitment. "His," I said. "You can decide what to do with it." For a moment, no one spoke. "We don't understand," Sarah whispered finally. "Why would he do this now? Why would he go to her now?" "That's a question you'll have to ask him," I replied. My voice surprised me with how steady it sounded. "All I know is he made a choice, and it wasn't me. I'm just accepting that." Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. David's fingers tightened around the ring boxes. "I am so sorry," he said, and I believed him. "You didn't deserve this, Isla." "I know," I said softly, "but I'm glad I found out now, and not after I changed my name. I wish them well. I meant it." Then I turned, walked back to my car, and drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw them still standing in the doorway, 2 confused, heartbroken parents holding the remnants of a future their son had just thrown away. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt empty, like my body had executed a plan my heart hadn't caught up to yet. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes, ordered a pizza, and opened my laptop. New document. Subject line, wedding cancellation. Isla Jennings and Ethan Clark. Body. Due to unforeseen circumstances, the wedding of Isla Jennings and Ethan Clark, scheduled for date, has been canceled. We apologize for any inconvenience this may cause. No details, no drama. Let the rumors work twice as hard to get half as close to the truth. I hit send to the entire guest list. Then, only then, I picked up my phone and turned it face up again. No new messages from Ethan. Of course not. He was busy getting closure. I set the phone down on the coffee table, leaned back into the too-big couch, and listened to the quiet. For the first time in 3 years, it was completely, peacefully quiet. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet was going to become my favorite sound in the world. A week after I pressed send on that cancellation email, I sat on the same couch in the same quiet apartment, staring at the same blank TV screen. If you scrolled through my phone during that week, it would have looked strangely normal. Work emails, group chat memes, marketing spam, no explosions, no declarations, just absence where Ethan used to be. But underneath that, everything had shifted. I ended up writing a kind of update for myself in my notes app. Not for the internet, not for friends, just for me, like a case file on my own life. Update 1, timeline, 7 days post-cancellation. Status, wedding, dead. Engagement, dead. Savings, bleeding out. Emotional condition, numb with brief flashes of rage and relief. Where we left off, in 12 hours, I had called off a $60,000 wedding, returned 2 rings, sent a mass cancellation email, and packed my almost husband's life into 22 labeled boxes. Ethan, meanwhile, was exactly where he wanted to be, on a weekend closure trip with his ex-girlfriend. The silence for the next 3 days was absolute. No calls, no texts, no can we talk, nothing. If I'd needed proof that I'd made the right decision, that was it. The man who was supposedly devastated by doubts about marrying me didn't seem remotely concerned that I wasn't answering questions like, "Did you pick final songs for the DJ?" or "What time is our venue walkthrough?" The only reason he'd notice anything was wrong, I realized, was when his mother called him. And I was fine with that. While Ethan was off chasing emotional ghosts, I got busy doing something much less romantic, untangling our lives. First on the chopping block was the honeymoon. I called the travel agent Monday morning. "I'm so sorry to hear that," she said in that professionally sympathetic voice people use around death and non-refundable deposits. "Unfortunately, at this stage—" "I know," I cut in. "Just do what you can." She managed to claw back a little on the hotel, but the flights? Gone. The prepaid experiences? Gone. Another $5,000 evaporated in a transaction history. I stared at the confirmation email with the same calm I'd had reading Ethan's text. I used to dream about that trip. Cliffs and blue water and us starting our married life in some Pinterest-worthy sunset. Now all I could picture was him on a different plane, headed toward Mara. Next were the joint accounts and subscriptions. People underestimate how many tiny threads you tie between yourselves in a serious relationship. It's not just shared savings and rent. It's Netflix and Spotify and a grocery app you both log into. It's the cloud storage you pay for because he takes too many photos and the food delivery account that has both your favorite orders saved. One by one, I opened each account and cut the thread. Change password. Remove Ethan Clark as an authorized user. Update billing information. On our landlord's portal, Ethan was listed as an occupant, but not as a tenant. One email later, his name was gone. The next time he walked past the building, there would be no official record he'd ever lived here. With each click, each removal, something inside me loosened. It was petty and profound at the same time. This is what people don't talk about when they romanticize fighting for love. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop fighting and start deleting. Sunday evening, my phone finally rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't have the energy to deal with telemarketers or Ethan's friends or, honestly, anybody. A text came through right after. Jessica. Isla, it's Jessica. What is going on? Ethan's parents are freaking out and not making any sense. They said you called off the wedding. Is this some kind of joke? Jessica. Technically, she was Ethan's closest friend, not mine. They'd grown up together. She was his would-be best man, a detail he'd been oddly proud of. I liked her well enough, or I used to. I stared at the message for a long moment, feeling a familiar irritation rise. When a man sets everything on fire, somehow the first question is always, what did she do? I typed back, no joke, the wedding is off. You should probably ask Ethan why. Her reply came almost instantly, as if she'd been staring at her phone waiting for mine to light up. He's not answering his phone. We're all worried. What did you do? There it was. Not what happened. Not Isla. Are you okay? What did you do? I could almost see the group chat in my mind. Ethan's friends half panicking, half gossiping, already writing a version of this story where I was the villain. I locked my phone without replying. If they wanted answers, they could start with the man currently in another city, on another couch, in another woman's arms. The main event didn't hit until Monday morning. I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed with another unknown number. I spat, wiped my mouth, and actually considered answering this time. I didn't. A few seconds later, the voicemail icon appeared. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I pressed play. Isla, call me right now. Ethan's voice. Frantic. High-pitched in a way I'd never heard before. My mom just called me screaming, he continued. She said you gave the rings back. What is going on? Why would you do that without talking to me? This is insane. Call me. I watched myself in the mirror as I listened. Hair a mess, an old t-shirt, toothbrush still in hand. Not once in that voicemail did he mention Mara. Not once did he say, I shouldn't have sent that text. I'm sorry. He wasn't shocked by what he'd done. He was shocked by the fact that I'd reacted. The text messages started 5 minutes later. Why are you doing this? I told you I still loved you. My parents are acting like I committed a crime. You twisted everything. You had no right to cancel everything without even talking to me. Jessica said you emailed the entire guest list. How could you humiliate me like that? It was fascinating, in a detached sort of way, realizing how quickly he'd cast himself as the victim in a story he'd started. In his version, apparently, the real offense wasn't him disappearing with his ex 3 weeks before our wedding. It was me refusing to quietly wait at home until he decided whether I was good enough to come back to. No apology, no ownership. Just outrage that the consequences had arrived before he was done playing. I let him rage over text for a few hours. Let him throw every accusation out of his system. I read every word. I felt, not nothing exactly, just tired, bone-deep tired. Finally, I sent my one and only reply. You said you needed to see Mara to get closure before you could marry me. I accept that. The engagement is over. Your belongings are packed in the spare room. Please let me know when you'd like to arrange for pickup. I would prefer if your father or a moving service handle it. It took him 20 seconds to respond. You're a monster. You're overreacting. You took that text the wrong way. I was going to come home and talk everything through. You changed the locks? This is psycho, Isla. Let me in to get my things. I hadn't actually told him I'd changed the locks yet. A beat later came another message. Wow, my key doesn't work. Did you seriously? I sighed. Yes, the locks have been changed. Please arrange a time for pickup. That, apparently, was the unforgivable act. Not that he'd chosen to test drive his ex before committing his life to me, but that I'd had the nerve to secure my own apartment without his permission. His messages spiraled into insults. When he ran out of words, other numbers started popping up. Jessica. You're being so controlling and manipulative. She meant he, but the slip said a lot. Made one little mistake because he was stressed about the wedding and you destroyed his life. Lauren. Real women fight for their relationships. They don't just throw them away like trash. Ethan deserves better than this. A little mistake. Planning a secret trip to see your ex. Lying by omission for weeks. Buying plane tickets. Packing bags. Consciously choosing not to tell me. All neatly filed under oops. For the first time since the text, real anger flared in my chest. Not because of what they were saying about me, but because they were making him smaller than he already was. Calling it a little mistake implied he'd slipped, tripped, and fallen into Mara's arms. This wasn't a slip, it was a decision, a series of them. And somewhere under all those decisions was a version of me he'd decided he could live without. I blocked their numbers. One by one, the indignation vanished into silence. The apartment went quiet again. A few days later, a mutual friend reached out. He'd seen the cancellation email, heard the whispers, wanted to check in. We talked for a while. The safe, surface-level kind of chat people have when they don't know whose side the truth is on. Then, after a long pause, he sighed. There's something I should probably tell you, he said. I thought it was just stupid flirting. I didn't think it would go this far. My grip tightened around my mug. What? Ethan's been in contact with Mara for months, he admitted. Since, I don't know, late last year. It wasn't just like, hey, how are you? It was intense. A lot of long calls, DMs. He kept saying he was just getting closure about how it ended. I told him it was a bad idea, but he trailed off, guilt thick in the silence between us. So this sudden crisis of doubt, I said quietly, wasn't sudden. No, he said. The weekend trip? That was supposed to be his final test. See what it felt like to be with her again before he married you. His final test, I repeated, my voice flat. And I was what? The control group? He didn't answer. I didn't need him to. In that moment, everything snapped into terrifyingly sharp focus. The late texts, the weird half-excuses, the way he sometimes looked at me, like he was trying to superimpose someone else's face over mine. Ethan hadn't just gone for closure. He'd gone to see if the fantasy of getting back with Mara felt better than the reality of marrying me. He wanted to have his cake and eat it too. He just never imagined that while he was gone, I would throw the entire cake in the trash. I hung up the phone and sat there in the quiet, staring at the 22 boxes stacked in the spare room. For the first time since it all began, the numbness cracked. Not into sobbing or screaming. Into something far more dangerous. Resolve. If he thought he could choose between us on his timeline, he was about to learn what it felt like to have that choice taken away. And the real fun, the part he'd never see coming, hadn't even started yet. Saturday arrived with the kind of heavy gray sky that makes the world feel slower, quieter. Fitting, I thought. There's something almost poetic about lousy weather on the day you return someone's entire life to them in cardboard boxes. At 9:02 a.m., 2 minutes past the time we'd agreed upon, a moving truck pulled up in front of my building. The engine rumbled for a few seconds, then shut off. The street settled into silence again. I stood in the hallway, arms crossed, listening for footsteps on the stairwell. It didn't take long. Voices, heavy breathing, the clatter of someone trying and failing not to bang a large object into the railing. Then David Clark appeared at the top of the stairs, followed by his brother, both men looking older than they had 2 weeks ago. And behind them, on the sidewalk outside the glass entry door, stood Ethan. He wasn't coming in. Whether that was his choice or because David told him he wasn't welcome, I couldn't tell. He stood with his hands shoved into his jacket pockets, shoulders hunched, sunglasses on even though the sky was thick with clouds. He looked small, not physically, emotionally, like a man who'd been walking in the wrong direction for miles and just realized the road ended. David cleared his throat. "Morning, Isla." "Morning," I said, keeping my tone neutral. He stepped forward. "We'll get started." "The boxes are in the spare room," I said, "all 22. I stepped back, holding the door open just enough for them to pass. David nodded in thanks and entered. His brother followed, eyes darting around the apartment like he expected to find bodies taped under the floorboards. Ethan didn't move. He stayed at the entryway just outside the door, exactly where I had stated he was allowed to stand, not even an inch closer. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about boundaries, something he had failed to respect long before this day. The first time he opened his mouth, the words came out thin and strained. Isla, we didn't have to do this like strangers. I didn't look at him. Strangers would have treated me better. That shut him up. Behind me, David began hauling the first box down the hall. Where should we stack these? He asked. In the truck, I replied. I labeled everything. Should be easy. We fell into a strange, silent rhythm. David and his brother carrying box after box. Ethan standing in the doorway like a ghost trying to cross a threshold he no longer had permission to enter. And me, leaning against the wall, arms folded, watching the slow erasure of him from my home. Every box seemed to weigh more than the last, not because of the items inside, but because of what they represented. Every compromise I made, every doubt I swallowed, every future plan I built for someone who'd been quietly building an exit ramp. About halfway through, Ethan tried again. His voice cracked on the first syllable. You didn't have to pack everything. We could have just talked. I offered many chances to talk, I said. You chose not to take them. He shook his head, the sunglasses hiding his eyes but not the desperation creeping into his posture. You blindsided me, Isla. I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. You sent me a text saying you needed a weekend with your ex to get closure, 3 weeks before our wedding. The only person blindsided was you, when you realized there were consequences. He flinched like I'd thrown something at him. Good. Pain wasn't always cruelty. Sometimes it was clarity. When the last 6 boxes remained, David paused, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. That should be everything after this, he said, breath heavy. He glanced at Ethan, not angrily, not sympathetically, but with the exhausted disappointment of someone watching their child walk straight into traffic after being given every warning not to. Thank you for packing things so neatly, he added. It made this easier. It was the least I could do, I said truthfully. They headed back down the hall. When they were out of earshot, Ethan's voice came again, small, quiet, almost broken. Isla, please. He took one tiny step forward, not into the apartment, just closer to the edge of the doorway, like a man begging to be heard by someone who finally stopped listening. Are you happy now? He asked. You got what you wanted? You ruined everything. That was the moment I turned to look at him fully, the first time since this whole disaster began. And all I saw was a stranger. Not the man I loved, not the man I almost married, just someone who made his choices and didn't like who he became because of them. I didn't ruin anything, I said quietly. I just cleaned up the mess you made. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lash out. I didn't cry. I simply told the truth, and it landed harder than any scream could have. Ethan's jaw clenched, his throat bobbing like he was swallowing words he didn't know how to say. Behind him, David called his name. The last box, David said from the truck. Let's go. Ethan hesitated, but in the end he walked away. Not because he wanted to, but because there was nothing left to stay for. When the door closed behind them, the silence hit me all over again. Not heavy this time, not suffocating, just quiet. A clean break in sound, like the end of a song that had been stuck on repeat for far too long. I leaned my forehead against the door, exhaling slowly. It was over. The wedding, the engagement, the excuses, the slow dawning realization that I had loved someone who didn't know what commitment meant. It was all over, or so I thought. But endings with people like Ethan aren't clean. They linger. They reshape themselves in other people's mouths. They mutate into stories you don't recognize. I didn't know it then, but the next chapter wasn't peace. It was war. Not the loud, explosive kind. The quiet, whisper behind your back kind. The kind that stains reputations. The kind that twists narratives. The kind that turns you from heartbroken to villain in less than a week. The kind where the only weapon sharp enough to cut through the lies is the truth he wrote himself. If you've ever ended a relationship that other people were invested in, you know this truth. The breakup doesn't stay between the two of you. It becomes public property. And when the other party refuses to take responsibility, the story you lived gets rewritten into something you don't recognize. That's exactly what happened next. A week after Ethan collected his boxes, I began noticing the shift. It started small. A friend of a friend hesitating before greeting me at the grocery store, a coworker asking with careful wording if I was doing okay. Then came the messages. Quiet ones. Indirect ones. Hey, someone said Ethan's really struggling. Is it true you blindsided him? I heard he didn't even get a chance to talk to you before you threw him out? That sounds unlike you. My sister knows one of his bridesmaids. They're saying you overreacted and humiliated him. At first, I brushed it off. Let people talk, I thought. I knew what happened. Ethan knew. His parents knew. But rumors are parasites. They don't need truth to spread, just a host. And Ethan had hosts everywhere. The smear campaign begins. It didn't take long before I found the digital fingerprints. Vague posts on Instagram stories. Subtweets. A carefully curated image of Ethan as the devastated, blindsided groom-to-be with a cruel, impulsive fiancé. They never used my name. They didn't need to. People love filling in the blanks. Sometimes you think you know someone. Escape toxicity just in time. Emotional manipulation isn't love. Proud of you, bro. Real partners talk things through. They don't destroy everything in one day. Jessica and Lauren were the loudest voices, the self-appointed moral committee of Ethan's downfall. Their posts read like feminist fortune cookies with none of the nuance. Women who are threatened by the past have no clue how to build a future. Men shouldn't be punished for being honest about their feelings. Some people are addicted to drama. They create storms and then claim it's raining. I almost admired the artistry of the narrative. They painted Ethan as the brave man trying to be emotionally honest, and me as the unstable woman who snapped. It might have been funny if it hadn't started bleeding into my real life, because then my mother called. Her voice was shaking. Isla, someone told Linda that Ethan said he was scared of you, that you locked him out in a rage, that you refused to even talk. I almost dropped my phone. My own mother, who has known me for 32 years, was calling to ask if I had become the kind of person who traps men out of apartments and cancels weddings in screaming hysteria. I didn't scream, I said quietly. I didn't rage. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry. But people are saying, I know what people are saying, I cut in. And none of it is true. My mother went silent, not in disbelief, in anger, but not at me. At him. And that was when I realized something. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Silence was grace, but silence was also permission. And Ethan was using my silence like a shield. The quiet revenge. There's an art to revenge, a subtlety, an elegance. The kind that doesn't require yelling or posting cryptic quotes online. All you need is the truth. And conveniently, Ethan had written the perfect truth himself. I scrolled back to the moment everything broke. The message that detonated a $60,000 wedding and a 3-year relationship. Hey, I know this is bad timing, but I can't stop thinking about Mara. I reread it once, twice, 3 times. Then I took a screenshot. Just one. Not the whole conversation. Not any follow-up texts. No commentary. Just his own words. I didn't post it publicly. That would have been messy. And messy would have made me look exactly like the villain they were writing. Instead, I sent it to 3 people. Only 3. Because sometimes you don't need an army. You just need the right messengers. Message number 1, Jessica's husband. A decent guy, quiet, level-headed, not a fan of drama. I sent the screenshot with a single sentence. This is the minor disagreement Ethan says I destroyed our relationship over. Thought you should know the truth. 10 minutes later, the typing bubble appeared. Then disappeared. Then reappeared. Then, thank you for sending this, I had no idea. Later, through a friend, I'd learned he confronted Jessica about enabling Ethan's narrative. Jessica went quiet on social media for a while after that. Funny how that works. Message number 2, my best man equivalent. On my side of the wedding party, I had someone similar to a best man, a lifelong male friend who was well connected among Ethan's social circle, a bridge between our worlds. I forwarded him the screenshot. My note, in case anyone asks what happened, this is why the wedding ended, not the fiction being spread. He responded, got it, don't worry, I'll shut down the rumors. And he did. Within hours, messages stopped. Within days, people began looking at me with quiet understanding instead of suspicion. Truth travels slowly, but it always arrives. Message number 3, Sarah Clark. This one mattered. Ethan's mother had been sobbing on my doorstep when I returned the rings. She loved me, she trusted me, and she was being fed the same lies everyone else was. My message to her was different. Sarah, I have stayed silent while others tell untrue versions of the breakup. I don't want public drama, but I want you to know the exact words that ended the engagement. I hope this helps you understand the truth. I sent the screenshot. 5 minutes later, she replied, thank you, Isla, for being honest. I'm so sorry. That was it. No excuses for her son, no attempts to soften the blow, just quiet heartbreak for the truth she could no longer ignore. And the next day, word spread. Not from me, but from the one place Ethan hadn't expected, his own mother. Within 48 hours, the smear campaign collapsed. Jessica stopped posting. Lauren unfollowed Ethan. Mutual friends reached out with apologies disguised as check-ins. Reputations don't implode loudly. They crumble quietly. The Mara situation. The twist I didn't see coming. Just when I thought the dust was settling, a mutual friend called. "You're not going to believe this," he said. I already knew it would be about Mara. It was always about Mara. "What happened?" I sighed. "Ethan showed up at her place after the trip," he said, "with boxes, like expecting to stay for a while." I blinked, then laughed. One sharp, stunned breath. And her husband kicked him out. My grip tightened. "Her what?" "Husband," he repeated. "Mara is married." My jaw actually dropped. He continued, "She told Ethan she and her husband were basically separated. They weren't. So when Ethan tried to bring his stuff over, the husband told him if Mara didn't cut him off, he'd file for divorce." "And she chose her husband," I finished. He exhaled. "Yep, Ethan burned down his life for someone who wasn't even available." I sat there absorbing it. The emotional affair, the secrecy, the weekend trip, the imploded wedding, the 22 boxes. All of it. For a fantasy that slammed the door in his face. Poetic justice doesn't always come quickly. But when it does, it writes itself better than any script. And that was the day I stopped being angry. Not because Ethan suffered, that wasn't my goal, but because I finally understood something important. The man I almost married wasn't someone who made one bad decision. He was someone who lived inside delusions and expected me to live there with him. Now he was out of delusions and out of options. And for the first time in months, I felt something resembling peace. Little did I know the financial chapter, the one where he tried to steal from me, was still coming. And I wouldn't let him walk away from that either. There's a moment after a storm ends when the air feels deceptively still, that quiet trick where nature pretends everything is over. But storms don't end cleanly. They leave behind debris. And in my case, the debris came in the form of missing money. The discovery. It happened on a Wednesday night. I'd poured myself a glass of wine, opened my laptop, and decided to do one last sweep of accounts before closing anything permanently. I wasn't expecting surprises. I had been thorough, methodical. But as I logged into the joint savings account, the one we'd used exclusively for wedding expenses, my heart stalled. The balance read, $0,000. I blinked, refreshed the page, checked the transaction history. There it was. Withdrawal, $10,000, authorized by Ethan Clark. Date. The day after he picked up the boxes. A hot, sharp heat flared in my chest. Not heartbreak, not sadness. Indignation. Because here's the truth. Ethan didn't just make a mistake. He didn't just cheat emotionally. He didn't just run to Mara. He stole from me. And adrenaline has a way of cutting through numbness like a knife. I stared at the screen, letting it sink in. $10,000. $10,000 that was supposed to be mine as well as his. $10,000 that he grabbed while pretending I had wronged him. He didn't take back gifts. He didn't pack sentimental items. He took money we both contributed and left me with the wreckage. I closed the laptop gently, not because I was calm, because my anger was too clean, too controlled for dramatic gestures. And men like Ethan, men who rewrite stories to make themselves the hero, never expect consequences written in legal language. The lawyer. The next morning, I booked a consultation. The attorney was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed, efficient, the kind of woman who has seen every kind of breakup, manipulation, and entitlement play out in real time. She listened without interrupting. She scrolled through the printout of the withdrawal record. Then she looked up at me and said, "Legally, this is actionable." I felt something inside me unclench. "So I'm not crazy?" "Oh, he's crazy," she said, leaning back in her chair. You're the one cleaning up." She drafted a letter, crisp, formal, devastating in its precision. It demanded $5,000, my half of the joint funds, to be returned within 14 days. No accusations, no dramatics, just the law. But then she did something masterful. She attached an itemized list of every non-refundable wedding expense I had covered, not to demand repayment, just to document it, to make the moral weight clear. And at the end, she added, "My client is not seeking recovery of the full wedding losses. She is only requesting the return of her rightful portion of the joint account funds that Mr. Clark withdrew after the engagement was terminated." Translation? "We know what you did. We're letting you off easy. Don't make this worse." She mailed it to his parents' house, the only address he was reliably using now. And then we waited. The check. It arrived 9 days later. A plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $5,000, signed not by Ethan, but by David Clark. There was no note, no apology, no explanation. Just the money. Just the quiet acknowledgement that they knew exactly who was in the wrong. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something close to closure. Real closure. Not the type you chase in another city. Not the type you whisper about in someone else's bed. Not the type you text your fiancé about without thinking through the consequences. This was the kind of closure that comes from truth, accountability, and a line finally drawn in permanent ink. 6 months later, people think healing is a cinematic moment, a sunrise, a new romance, a single epiphany. It's not. It's repainting your living room because you suddenly can. It's buying a new couch because the old one held memories you didn't want anymore. It's throwing away chargers that belonged to a man who always forgot his. It's sleeping in the middle of the bed again. My apartment transformed slowly, piece by piece. So did I. I took up hiking again, joined a trivia group on Thursday nights, started cooking meals that I liked instead of ones Ethan didn't mind. Stopped checking my phone for messages that would never come. For the first time in years, I rediscovered what it felt like to make decisions without compromise. Freedom isn't loud. It's quietly choosing yourself every day. Ethan's downfall. From a distance. Every so often, updates filtered through people who didn't know how to mind their business. Ethan was living back with his parents. He'd lost touch with Jessica and Lauren. He was working a job that paid significantly less than the one he had planned to keep after the honeymoon. His reputation? Let's just say the guy who ran back to his married ex and lost everything is not a flattering nickname. As for Mara, her husband gave her one chance. She took it. Ethan wasn't part of it. Ethan had gambled his entire life on nostalgia and lost. And I wasn't gloating. I genuinely wasn't. Because the real win wasn't watching him struggle. The real win was realizing I no longer felt anything about it. The final sighting. It happened at a bar, the kind of place with sticky tables, trivia nights, and cheap beer. My team had just won second place, and we were laughing, shoving chips across the table, celebrating nothing and everything. I went to grab napkins. And there he was, Ethan, across the room, holding a drink he wasn't drinking, standing with people he clearly didn't know well, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years and 6 months. He noticed me before I noticed him. Our eyes met. For a moment, time tightened, not painfully, just noticeably. He gave me a small, sad smile. Something like apology, something like regret, something like recognition of the life he threw away. And I waited for the wave of emotion, the heartbreak, the anger, the nostalgia, the ache. None of it came. I felt neutral, free, whole. I nodded once, polite, distant, and walked away. His face blurred back into the crowd, just another stranger in a bar. And that was the closure he'd gone looking for with Mara. But I was the one who finally got it.